So this may seem like a simple process to talk about this, but actually, what is a beginning to one person may not be a beginning to another. I'm not saying that the beginnings of films are subjective. I'm saying the length of the beginning, what one would consider the beginning, could vary from person to person. For example, one person might be more interested in how a film is structured and say that the beginning of film is the first act. Okay. Another person might, when they talk about the beginning of the movie, just describe a scene. So, for example, two good examples, both from Steven Spielberg. Jaws. The opening scene of Jaws is unforgettable. It's a young woman. She's naked, swimming with the moonlight, and I forget what they're called. It's like it's floating in the water so boats can see it. I forget the name of it. It's not coming to me right now. But all of a sudden, she gets attacked by the shark, and her body's just writhing in the water back and forth. And she goes under the water, and then all the things there's that just thing. It's left just floating there in the water, and she's gone. And the acting is really good, and it's very intense. And the scene's over in 2 minutes. It's real fast. And I would not blame somebody for saying that's the beginning of Jaws, right? Would make perfect sense to me. But now take the beginning of Indiana Jones. You might consider the beginning of Indiana Jones, and I could not blame you, to be when he gets on the plane and finds the snakes in the bottom of the plane and escapes from the natives. I wouldn't blame somebody if they thought the beginning was when the boulder comes rolling down and he escapes. To them, that might be the beginning. I could see that. So when I talk about beginning, for some of these films, I may stop very short. I may talk about, in very limited detail about what is the beginning. And others, I may go up to the first plot point. Now, that leads to another question. What's the first plot point? You're going to learn a lot about movies right here. If you don't already know this, which you may. If you know anyone from film school, or if you yourself have attended film school, you may know that Sid Field is a pretty well-known name for film students. He's pretty much required reading. He wrote a book called Screenplay back in the 80s. I read it back in the 90s because I was trying to become a screenwriter. And I wrote several screenplays, none of which are any good, and not all of them are complete. In case you get curious about that and think, oh, wow, he's written some scripts. Yeah, sure, big deal. It's not really that big of a deal. They were never submitted for anyone to look at or anything like that. But Sid Field, in this book, deconstructs how screenplays are written and how they eventually get themselves onto the screen in a film. And he challenges you to watch films differently, to challenge films with screenplays in mind. And one of the ideas he presents in his deconstruction is that there are 3 acts, and from about the 20-minute mark to the 25-minute mark of the first act, there's what's called a plot point, okay? And about the 45 to 55-minute mark of the second act is another plot point. Now, what's a plot point? A plot point is an event that thrusts the narrative into the next act. It makes the entire, it's a transitional step to take you from one act to another. Okay? So in some of these films, I may get to the first plot point. Okay? So, 3 best beginnings quotes, right? Best beginnings in films. These are controversial. These are just my opinions. And in fact, in 6 months, you could ask me the same question. I may give you 3 totally different answers. These are just 3 I've been thinking about that I really enjoy. These films may not all be in my top 5 or top 3. I just think these beginnings are really good. So the first one is Empire Strikes Back. Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back. It is quite a compelling beginning. And the reason why I say that is because look at what's happening. First, the amount of information that's being delivered to the audience is done so well. So what you have is you learn that Darth Vader is going to be on the attack. Darth Vader is going to be hunting them. You learn that that's what this movie is going to be about. That's what Empire Strikes Back is about, right? It's about Darth Vader on the hunt. Now, I won't spend a lot of time on this. I will talk about it. I have talked about it in previous videos. I'll probably talk about it in the future. But the main characters are not reactive, though, to this. Okay, they're proactive, despite Darth Vader coming for them. That's very important for Empire Strikes Back. But that said, when you see those, it's very subtle, but they're sending those probe droids down to the planets, and you learn very early on that they're looking for the rebel base. And so now, where does this beginning end? And the reason why I'm picking this for my number 3 is because of the brilliance of the amount of information you're given in such a creative way that we know you can figure out what this movie is about in the opening act, no problem, without knowing another thing about what's going to happen. And it's very compelling. Darth Vader is searching for them. That's a really scary guy to have searching for you. And it's so good. It's so interesting. I also like it that the rebels are hiding on a snow planet. The reason why I think that's so interesting is because what do you want to do if you're in the snow? You want to bundle up. You want to get secure, you know? And so it gives you this feeling, I don't know if this was intended, but it gives you this feeling that when they come in after them, they're in this secure place. So leaving, it's a problem, right? They're in a secure place. It's meant to keep them trapped in from the environment. And now when the Empire invades, they need to bust out of all of this. And so it really presses down onto the audience that they are just trapped. And so when you get to the ion cannons and all that, and you see the first, it says the first transport is away and everybody cheers, the idea is, they're breaking out, right? And you even see the ion cannons encased in ice itself. Really interesting. And just these elements, you don't see these in any other Star Wars. Even the originals. This is the only one of the original that I really think, of the original 3, that I think really hits on some elements that are working at different levels, making it a great movie. And so making it, though, a particularly good beginning. And where would you say the beginning ends, right? I mean, you could clearly, I would say the plot point is when Han Solo shoots the probe droid. And he says, it's a good bet the Empire knows we're here. That's where you get the screen wipe, and it's like, uh-oh, things are going to take off now. And I bet that's between the 25 and 30 minute mark. Sidfield says these things usually tend to emerge. Okay, my number 2. My number 2 is way different from Empire Strikes Back. My number 2 is Blue Velvet. Blue Velvet's beginning is deliberately working at a very deep psychological level. It's not subtle. He's not trying to give you, it's obvious what he's doing. Like Lynch sometimes can be very subtle. He's not subtle. Now, I should warn you, if this interests you, the last time I watched Blue Velvet, it actually exhausted me. Frank Booth is one of the most twisted and evil villains ever conceived. And it actually tires me when I see it. But if you're easily offended, you do not want to watch Blue Velvet. There's a lot of very dark and twisted things happening in this film. But the beginning, David Lynch said the first ideas that came to him for Blue Velvet was white fences and red lips. That was his inspiration for Blue Velvet. And so he said, the beginning is you see this fire engine and there's a dog on it and people are waving. You see the white picket fences and the beautiful green glass. It's very beautiful. Now that's not the very, very beginning. The very, very beginning, the father is taking a hose and he's hosing the lawn, and then the hose gets twisted, and that represents his clogged artery probably. He holds his neck and falls to the ground, and then in slow motion you see a dog biting at the water that's coming out of the hose. And that's going to play into what you're getting ready to see with the beautiful lawns and the beautiful, fence and everything. And then you see the grass, and all of a sudden the camera goes into the grass. And again, that kind of slow motion that you saw with the dog, these beetles are tearing each other apart. And this is not subtle. He is trying to show you that there are two worlds in this town. One world is the beautiful, pretty world that everyone wants to believe is the only world. But there's this other world on Lincoln Street, right? If you know anything about Blue Velvet, it's all on Lincoln Street. Frank Booth, Abraham Lincoln, kind of interesting. And there's this dark, sinister world there, right around them, right underneath them. They don't even know it. I'm not sure. I think the plot point in Blue Velvet is also absolutely fascinating. So Jeffrey Beaumont's the main character. He's walking home. And there's just this glass bottle. Earlier, he had thrown some rocks at it. And he starts throwing some rocks at a glass bottle. What's happening here? He's come home from college. And the idea is that this is just a sleepy little town. Not much going on. See a bottle in the field, throw some rocks at it. No big deal. Makes sense, right? And then all of a sudden he sees something, and it's a human ear. And David Lynch said that ear was a ticket to another world. And we've already seen that world. You don't want to go into that world. But Jeffrey is very curious about this world and wants to go into it. Blue Velvet has been best described by David Lynch's own admission as the Hardy Boys Go to Hell. I think that's a really, really great description of this movie. It is, if you're the fan of Heart, you don't want to watch this movie. I'm telling you, it's intense. But man, is it good. Okay, best beginning of the three. I bet anyone watching this, you may not argue with this, of the three films that I've selected. You may argue from another film that has a better beginning. If you don't mind, put that in the comments. I'd like to hear your opinion. But I think this is a standout movie and an incredible beginning, and that is Batman Dark Knight. The beginning of Batman Dark Knight, I'm not going to be able to take it to the plot point. That movie's so unique. I don't even know. I couldn't begin to guess what the first plot point is. I don't know. But that it's too intense to call a caper, right? A caper almost has comedic tones. This is a heist, and you learn a lot about the Joker, just like with Darth Vader in Empire Strikes Back. You learn a lot. You learn nothing about Frank Booth in the first act of Blue Velvet, but you learn some things about the Joker in the first act of Dark Knight, that he can't be trusted by anyone. He's almost chaotic, and that's, of course, going to play into Two-Face later, how he recruits Two-Face and everything. Or maybe you could say he creates Two-Face, but that's a whole nother debate. But that heist, if you've never seen it, you've got to see this heist. It is fascinating. And I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it, so I'll just say the people that are working with the Joker are finding out that he's not just not trustworthy. That would be one thing. But rather, he's planned out everything against them as well as against those they're performing the heist against. That's kind of what's happening, is there's a plan within the plan. There's the plan of the heist, but then the Joker has some other plan. And he is just against the people he's working with. My only complaint about this, about the opening scenes and first act of Dark Knight, is that some of it is kind of contrived. I'll pick an example. Like, you can memorize a bus schedule, right? But to have the bus crash into a bank and then pull out with another line of buses is and that's not the only thing. There's several things that he would have almost had to predict the future, okay, to be able to pull off. That's my only complaint. And I'm sure Nolan knew about this. The reality is, though, despite that, it's still incredible. And it's making me want to watch it right now. It's such a great film. But that beginning, I have no problem saying of these three movies is probably the all-time greatest beginning of a film that I've ever seen. Okay, ran really long. What's your favorite beginning? Have you ever considered how long would you consider a beginning of a film? Is it the first if it's meant to be something that shocks you, is that the beginning and that's it? Or maybe is it something that says, hey, this is what the movie is really about? Maybe that's actually the beginning. Who knows? It's up to you to decide, I think. All right, have a good one.